إن الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على سيد المصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه ومن والاه وبعد. فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الحديث هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أيها الأخوة الكرام وأخوات السيدات, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We thank our brother very much for the introduction which he gave, and many of his words were undeserving of your brother Khalid, but intended well. Alhamdulillah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the good actions which we have and the good efforts which we make, and we ask Him to forgive us for our mistakes and our shortcomings, and to cause whatsoever we do with sincerity to be on our scales on the Day of Judgment. Ameen. Brothers and sisters, relative to this topic, this is I would say, a fairly straightforward topic for me. Being from America, there probably are thousands of brothers and sisters who could deliver this presentation in America, because many of us, we didn't read it. It's not theoretical for us. Many of us, especially those who are my contemporaries, who were born in the 60s in America, who lived in the 60s, that is, in America, many of us, we had a very straightforward, in some cases a very direct relationship with El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. And what we want to talk about here, we want to leave from the phenomena of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a phenomena, and Allah knows best what part of Malcolm X is worthy to be followed or remembered. But what we want to discuss is the short life of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. Because Malcolm X died, that man died. It's like when a snake loses his skin, and that's gone. And that's when the caterpillar became a butterfly. When he made the pilgrimage is when he discovered himself. When he made the pilgrimage to Mecca, this when he was guided. This when he took the name El-Hajj, which means someone who made the Hajj, the pilgrimage, Malik Shabazz. He took that name because that distinguished himself from Malcolm X, who was the minister and representative of a deviant group calling themselves the Nation of Islam. Without going into a lot of details about their deviance and why they are not Muslims and so forth and so on, I want to talk today about El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, not Malcolm X. The man, his mission and his message. We want to keep in mind that this man, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, for us, that life, that short period of time spanned only 2.5 months. 2.5 months from the time that he performed his pilgrimage until the time that he was unfortunately assassinated. When we talk about the man, his mission, his message, we talk about what unfolded in those 2.5 months and what kind of legacy was left behind after that 2.5 months, and that's what I want to bring to you. Of course, in order to do that, it would only be fair to accurately give to you some of the biographical background that you may or may not be familiar with. Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little. That was his name. That was his family name, Little. He was born Malcolm Little, and he was born in Omaha, Nebraska, a state that is probably rarely visited or virtually unknown to most, even Americans. We know Omaha as a city. We know Nebraska as a state. But probably if you were to ask any of the 300 million Americans, where's Nebraska and what's it known for, and what about Omaha? They would probably give you just a zero. They don't have a clue. probably, perhaps, maybe 1 out of maybe 10,000 Americans have visited Nebraska and have visited Omaha. So, for us, Malcolm Little gave Omaha, Nebraska. It sort of put it on the map for us, because it would be a city that we would care less about if it were not for the fact that this was where this man was born. He was the youngest of 5 children. Actually, he was the youngest of 9 children, but in some biographical sketches they say 5 because they didn't accurately know that he had 8 brothers and sisters. His mother was an elementary school teacher, and his father was a Christian minister and a social activist and a college graduate. So he came from a very sort of, we would call at that time, a middle class, educated family. His father was a social activist. In fact, his father was a follower of a gentleman by the name of Marcus Garvey. And I would, if I were you, I would take that name, Marcus Garvey, and just go into Google and just put in Marcus Garvey, and then do a little bit of research, and you'll find out that this man was one of the most profound, Marcus Garvey, Afro-Caribbean reformers in the Western Hemisphere in the last 300 years. And you'll find that some major personalities, major Afro-Caribbean or Afro-American reformers in the last 100 years, they trace their thinking back to Marcus Garvey. The father of Malcolm was a follower of Marcus Garvey, one of the most influential visionaries and social reformers of the 20th century. As a direct result of his social reform and the preaching that he integrated into his Christian beliefs to defend the human rights of the ex-slave Negroes, his father was subsequently murdered by a group of people known as the Ku Klux Klan. I think you probably heard the KKK people. They're sort of like the BNP people, like the neo-Nazis. It's kind of like an offshoot of them. Not too much different, although in America they were allowed to be a little bit more blatant because they sort of served the interests of the American whites at that particular time. So these KKK people are a group of criminal white supremacists who are basically the same as the British National Party or the BNP that you know here. And Malcolm mentioned that these people, the KKK, threatened his father, burned a cross in front of our house, and he remembers that when he was a child, and told his father that if he didn't stop preaching or his defense of ex-slaves, they would kill him and they would cause other difficulties to his family. The father of Malcolm was a militant and brave activist, and to be a militant at that time, that means to speak out and not to be fearful of those who are oppressive. To speak out and in those times really meant that either you were crazy or otherwise you feared no one except God. So he was a very unusual man, the father of Malcolm. He refused to stop his preaching in the cause of his people's dignity and liberation. This eventually led to his father's execution at the hands of the KKK. Malcolm said that he could remember his father's body decapitated because he was tied to a railroad track. That is, they waited until they saw the light of the train at night, and they tied his father to a railroad track by his head, and of course the train wasn't able to stop, and Malcolm said he can remember being brought, and he and his children, to see his father's body decapitated. This tragedy left his mother traumatized, and she never recovered. She was committed to an institution for the mentally disturbed, and this is where she died. Malcolm then was placed under the care of an older sister and eventually moved to a city called Detroit, a large city in the